Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Sonic Discovery. I am your host, David Correa, and on this one, we'll be covering new music from Moby, The Breeders, and the debut from Soccer Mommy. Well guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. If you're not familiar with the show, let me just kind of briefly go over what it is that we do here on Sonic Discovery. So basically, there's a lot of music that comes out every Friday, and if you were to try to listen to all of it, it'd probably make you go crazy. So what happens here is that I pick out a few different albums that I find interesting, and I check them out, I review them on the show, and then you guys decide for yourselves if you want to either take my advice and listen to them or ignore them, or just kind of discover this on your own. The first album up for review on this episode is the newest from Moby. This is called Everything Was Beautiful. Well, I don't know about you guys, but it's been a while since I've listened to Moby. I know that the album that definitely brought him out to a mainstream audience was Play. I'd mentioned before that my beautiful wife, she got me a subscription to the club Vinyl Me Please, and that was actually the first album that I got through them. So I want to just kind of show this one. If you haven't listened to Play, there's so many different tracks that he had. I think it holds the record for, every track being licensed in some way. So you may have heard them in commercials, but, they had Southside, Porcelain, so many great stuff on this album. A mixture of downtempo and some gospel elements as well. I highly recommend you check this out. Well, now, getting to this new one, we still kind of have more of a down-tempo sound. Moby is doing his kind of trademark talking like vocals on this album, and he also incorporates a lot of different female singers that either take lead on some of these tracks or just help support him by singing the hooks on them. First, we're going to start things off by going over the songs that I thought were the best of the group. This includes the opening track, Mere Anarchy, which is a single released from the album. This has more of a brooding electro sound that I thought was very familiar to Depeche Mode. So if you're a fan of Depeche Mode, you're definitely going to like this track. Mindy Jones supports him with doing some background vocals on here, and she's actually featured quite a bit on this album. There's some nice string work provided that gives the track more of a cinematic feel, as he kind of is cautioning us about our failing world. The Waste of Suns also has Mindy Jones providing vocals on the hook, and this has a chill yet throbbing trip-hop sound. So this one particularly reminded me a lot of the group Massive Attack. Like a Motherless Child is an enjoyable single from this album. This one also has more of a trip-hop sound, as Rachel Rodriguez provides the hook on here, and Moby speaks through the verses. The Tired and the Hurt keeps the album with a very chill vibe, but now has a nice beat underneath it. Mindy comes back to provide vocals on the hook, as both her and Moby's vocals have a bit of layering and effects added to them. This track talks about wanting to be desired. Welcome to Hard Times is a groovier song that has Apollo Jones handling most of the vocals. The Wild Darkness is another mellow track with a steady beat underneath it. Here he's joined by all the different female contributors on vocals as they really close out the song nicely, especially towards the end, where the vocals on here are probably the best on the album. Here he's hoping for this one person to lead them out of the darkness. And my favorite track on this album is the closer, A Dark Cloud Is Coming, which brings back Apollo Jones, and this is a soft yet seductive track. I like the touches of the bluesy guitar used on here, as she speaks of trying to reach to God in these dark days. Aside from those great tracks, there's still a lot of other tracks on the album that I thought were still pretty decent. The Last Goodbye is more of a tranquil song, but here on the ending, we get a lot of erratic drumming. Ceremony of Innocence is another tranquil track, this time led by the piano, in which we have moments with very lush cinematic strings. Falling Rain and Light, another mellow track here with a nice rhythmic beat underneath. Synth pads are then used to kind of enhance the chorus, as well as different vocal effects as Julie Mines is on the hook. And on The Middle Is Gone, Moby talks about never being able to be freed because he's plagued by what he could never be. To close things out, this was an okay album from Moby. I liked a lot of the different sounds used, and the female vocals on here were all really effective, but it's just kind of a little too mellow. I would have liked maybe a couple tracks here and there that do change it up a bit, and we do get that in the beginning with more of the trip hop feel, but the rest of the album is just a lot of ballads that just kind of seem to weigh it down a bit. This is going to get a score of a 7 out of 10 from me. So definitely an album worth checking out, especially if you're a big fan of Moby. Next up for review, we have album number 5 from The Breeders. This is called All Nerve. Now, if you guys are familiar with The Breeders, it's because Kim Deal, who was in the Pixies, she kind of started this as the side project in the 90s, and they've released different albums, most notably Last Splash, which was a pretty big hit at the time, and had the pretty massive hit Cannonball that was all over radio. If you're not familiar with the track, just click play on any kind of player, and as soon as it starts, you'll instantly recognize it. This album actually features the return of the lineup that worked on that album, and that comprised of both Kim and her sister Kelly, which both play guitar and do vocals, Jim McPherson on drums, and Josephine Wiggs on vocals and bass. First, going through some of my personal favorites, we go right up at the top with the opening track, Nervous Mary. The track opens with quiet strumming, but then leads to a steady rocker with a bit of a bite. Here, Nervous Mary tries to run, but doesn't get very far. Wait in the Car is one of the singles released from this album, and this has a very familiar muscular sound from the band. All Nerve is also a single released from this album, and I thought this one had a really good representation of what you're going to find throughout, where it's a little bit more restrained, but yet it has moments where, the power comes through and it comes alive a bit. This song talks about a strong desire to want to be with somebody. Metagoth had a slower, sinister sound. The spooky guitars and the harsh snares add that bit of darkness to it. Space Woman is kind of like a slow crawler with quiet verses and more of a crunch on the chorus. Here she talks about being as lonely as an astronaut in space despite being surrounded by a sea of people. Walking with the Killer can kind of be considered the ballad of the album, but yet has moments with a bit of tension. Here she tells the story of a girl on her last day alive. Dawn making an effort is a truly beautiful moment on here with shining guitars as she talks about fighting to keep it going till the break of dawn. And Skidhead number 2 was another nice crawler with a bass line that I especially liked. Some other songs here worth a listen are Howl at the Summit, which had more of a muscular sound to the music, but nothing really new added here. Archangel's Thunderbird, which is actually a cover of a song by Amon Duel 2, and this one also provides a nice little jolt in the album. And the closing mid-tempo rocker, Blues at the Arcopolis, was also really nice, as they talk about the things that we once died for, but now we kind of take for granted. Overall, I was happy with this release. I kind of would have liked more urgency in here, some more fast tempos, because I think things still kind of stick within the mid-tempo range for a little too long. But still, we get a nice sound, you get the clarity of the full band, a nice addition to the discography. This is going to get a score of an 8 out of 10 from me. So if you're a fan of the Breeders from the past, if you're a fan of Last Splash and other albums that they've done, then I recommend you check this out. And to close out, we have the debut album from Soccer Mommy. This is called Clean. Now, Soccer Mommy is the stage name of Sophie Allison. She's released different projects, different kind of semi-albums that were more self-released. But this one you can kind of think of as her true debut album. Her sound is kind of referred to as bedroom pop. Also definitely has elements of indie rock thrown in there. And there was a lot of this album I really enjoyed. So let's go up to the top with the opening track, Still Clean, which is a really quiet opener. Here we get clear guitar, some nice vocals from Sophie, and also a bit of keyboards here that kind of bring out the sound a little bit more. Here she talks about waiting for someone to return when that person only really wanted her around for just a little while. Cool has a nice pop rock sound as she's talking about this guy that keeps searching for this certain girl and he thinks he found her, but in fact, she's kind of cruel and treats him like a piece of shit. There's something interesting that happens at the end here where it suddenly starts to slow down and makes it sound like the song's kind of melting away. Your Dog was a single release from the album, and this has a very catchy indie rock sound. Here, she's kind of coming to terms with how badly she was treated in her last relationship. She felt like she was just a dog tied up to a leash. Flaw is a quieter song with a really delicate sound on the chorus. Here, what she was hoping would be love is really just lust. Blossom, Wasting All My Time, has a quiet, dreamlike sound with simple but yet really beautiful vocals from Sophie. Here she talks about not wasting her time with the wrong person. And Last Girl, which is a catchy indie rock song with some pop sensibilities. Here she's envious of her guy's ex-girlfriend because in her mind, this girl had it all. And she stops to wonder, what would he want with me? Other pretty good songs from the album include the indie pop sound of Skin, when she wants to be that girl that gives you knots in your stomach, but also realizing that that's probably not going to happen. Scorpio Rising, which is another that switches from quieter moments to more of a full band sound. When she's hoping that this person sticks around because she's really happy right now, but seems like they're already looking for the next girl down the line. And then a nice little 1 minute guitar interlude that happens before we go into the closing track, Wildflowers, which has a slight beat that comes in on the second verse, which provides a little bit on the low end. Here she talks about possibly finding spirituality to kind of lead her out of this gloomy state that she's in. Overall, this was a pretty good debut from Soccer Mommy. It's a little gloomy, it kind of keeps the sound within, this very dreamlike indie pop sound, but still pretty rewarding. Universal lyrics that can, be understood by anybody that's either been in love or has had their heart broken. This is going to get a score of an 8 out of 10 from me. So an album worth checking out. Well, there it goes for another episode. 3 pretty decent albums that you should definitely give a listen to. If you like my reviews, then please make sure to leave a little comment at the bottom. Or, also, if you have any suggestions for me to, different albums for me to check out, make sure to leave those there. And while you're there, you can hit the like button or subscribe. On the next, I'll be talking about music from David Byrne, Ray Morris, and JPEG Mafia.